If you ever played IDV for a while, you must have noticed that every playable survivor in this game comes to the elitist Manor for something, right? They've all got their reasons. Revenge, redemption, doing a mission, well, maybe even free Wi-Fi. But do you know there's one unique character not tied to any of these Manor games? Well, technically two, but one of them is just an underage hallucination. So let's skip that one. Can anyone guess? Yep, it's the Lucky Guy. Now, Lucky Guy is a bit of an enigma. If you notice, he doesn't have a serial number, no birthday letters, no dramatic deduction quests, nothing. It's like he didn't even invite it to the party. Honestly, I'm starting to think he should change his name to Mysterious Guy or even Shady Guy, because who shows up to a life or death game with no background story? It's like being the one person at a reunion that no one remembers inviting. So, naturally, people start wondering, who is he really? What game was he even in? Did he just wander in here, looking for a vending machine? This is your broadcaster, Silmina, and today, let's dig a little deeper into Lucky Guy. Alright, since we're on a mission to figure out who exactly this Lucky Guy is, let's start by digging into his in-game files. Usually, you can piece together a survivor's backstory through birthday letters or deduction quests. So, let's go ahead and crack open his... Oh wait, we've got nothing. Absolutely zero. This guy's lore is as blank as my mind when someone asks me to play mechanic. Like I mentioned earlier, this dude, who looks like he waltzed in from the future with no ID, has zero clues about where he came from. Honestly, maybe he's just an alien who crash-landed here and forgot where he parked his UFO. But let's not give up hope just yet. He does have a character introduction, and when I say introduction, I mean it's about as informative as reading a turn left sign. If anyone can make sense of his backstory from that, I'll be giving you 2 thumbs up and a side eye because you clearly know something we don't. What else can we dig up? Oh right, his gameplay video. In that, we see him featured in the tutorial and, surprise, he's hanging out with Magician. So, does that mean Lucky Guy is from Game 9? Nope. Turns out the video is only for the tutorial, which means it's non-canonical. Not to mention that Magician gets smacked by Joker, leaving us all scratching our heads, wondering if we're suddenly in some kind of strange Game 9 and Game 8 crossover. Honestly, it feels like someone tried to bake a cherry pie and accidentally threw in chicken broth, and roasted it. So, let's recap this narrative. Lucky Guy's backstory? Completely blank. No birthday letters, no deduction quests, and that character intro? A joke. We don't know where he's from, what game he's even playing, or why he's got fans. The man's a mystery wrapped in an enigma wearing a modern outfit. For all we know, he's here from the future to sell us cryptocurrency. But hey, he's got fans. I guess when you're this shady, you don't need a backstory to make people like you. That, my friends, is what I call lucky. Since his in-game files are as revealing as a locked treasure chest, let's take a different route and check out his origins from character development. And that, my friends, is where we start to unravel the mystery behind this shady fellow. One of the most distinguishing features about Lucky Guy is his outfit. While everyone else is strutting around in Victorian fashion, looking like they just stepped out of a period drama, Lucky Guy's default skin looks like he's ready to hit the skate park. I mean, you could easily imagine him skateboarding past you and maybe accidentally knocking someone over. The question here is why? Why does he look like he's dressed for a casual day in 2024 while everyone else looks like they're headed to a steampunk tea party? Well, it's because Lucky Guy is a relic from the game's beta testing period. Now, what's beta testing, you ask? Great question! Buckle up, because we're diving into the history of Identity V, and only by understanding that can we get to the bottom of Lucky Guy's mysterious origins. Before Identity V took the shape we know today, it started with several rough drafts, like an artist doodling before painting the masterpiece. The concept began as early as July 2016, when some fresh recruits at NetEase formed a team and kicked off a mini project called Dangerous Game. It was just a fun little project they created as part of their training, not knowing it would eventually become the eerie, competitive madness we love and rage at today. Dangerous Game was originally just a concept for an asymmetrical horror game. According to IDV's website, the team felt the market for multiplayer online battle arena, or MOBA games, was oversaturated and honestly, a little stale. They saw that this new genre, asymmetrical horror, had room for innovation. The goal for this mini project was simple: make a game that's fun and low-key. No one expected it to blow up into a hardcore experience that would ruin friendships. Strengthen it. At first, Dangerous Game leaned into heavy horror vibes, the kind of stuff that makes you want to sleep with the lights on. But since not everyone is into horror, myself included, they thought, hey, maybe we should tone it down a bit so we don't scare away the entire player base. And thus, the Tim Burton-style art we know and love was born. Now, let's hit pause for a second. If the original game had a spooky, realistic horror vibe, and then shifted to a quirky Tim Burton-esque style, that means the art style had to go through a big change, right? Jackpot! Initially, Dangerous Game had a more modern, realistic look. And guess who came out of that era looking like a modern-day cool guy? Yep, you guessed it. Lucky Guy! He's the OG survivor, the blueprint, if you will. His modern look isn't a fashion statement. It's a throwback to the game's earliest concepts. So, now you understand why Lucky Guy rocks his modern outfit while everyone else is stuck in Victorian cosplay. He's the oldest survivor in terms of development. We could stop here and wrap up the Lucky Guy mystery, but if you're curious about the bigger picture of IDV's history, let's keep going. Dangerous Game stayed as a concept, but it was a hit. Many of its core ideas carried over into Identity V. For instance, the iconic game mechanics we know today. One hunter chasing down 4 survivors, trying to catch them before they escape through the gates. Survivors could switch between walking, running, and crouching, and hunters needed to knock survivors down twice before eliminating them. The vibe was eerie, unsettling, but the survivors, who looked like they just stepped out of a folklore nightmare, really amped up the spooky factor. Plus, in Dangerous Game, hunters could conceal their movements, giving off major Michael Myers vibes from Dead by Daylight. You know, that sneaky, jump scare kind of stalking that makes you question every sound behind you.
No! God, please, no! No!
Now let's dive into the second phase of Identity V's history, the early beta period. This phase kicked off after the Dangerous Game mini project wrapped up, and here's where things got spicy. New characters, maps, and in-game menus were all part of the mix. Of course, a lot of these ideas were scrapped before the final version, so if you didn't know this phase even existed, well, you're not alone. But don't worry, I've got you covered. First up, the character concepts. Dangerous Game was supposed to be creepy and eerie, only ruined by those cute little survivors. In the early beta, they threw in some new characters. And you know what? Lucky Guy, Mercenary, and Hell Ember were part of the batch that made it through. Take a look at these pictures for detail. The fun part about this phase is that it gave us a sneak peek at the game's direction. Ever notice some arts about survivors having human-like eyes and others have creepy doll-like eyes? Well, back then, they were toying with the idea of human eyes before deciding to mess with that doll look later. Oh, and let's not forget the gore. In the early beta, when survivors got hit, they didn't just stumble around like they were dizzy. They bled. A lot. The screams when they got hit were real. Hell Ember, well, he wasn't wielding a cuddly stuffed fish like he is now. Nope, it was a chainsaw. Yeah, they went hard on the horror. There's another fun part. all the characters in this phase wore modern outfits. No Victorian cosplay here, because initially, they were setting the game in the modern world only to ditch that idea for the old-timey aesthetic. And like I said, some of these early skins and characters didn't make it to the final cut, but Lucky Guy, Merc, and Hell Ember made it through the beta battlefield. At this point, it is unknown if the survivors have specific abilities or not, but they could pick their own items like a first aid kit or a flashlight, so none of this set items per character business. Hunters could even choose their weapons, chainsaws, axes, whatever. But whatever powers came with those weapons, well, that's a mystery that never saw the light of day. Oh, and let's talk about the bloody clothes concept. Characters had 4 levels of blood on their outfits, ranging from fresh and clean to drenched in blood. Why? Who knows? But it eventually turned into the worn clothes system, and we'll just pretend it makes sense. Moving on to the maps, there was only one, the Arms Factory. But unlike today's version, it was set at night, giving off Darkwood's vibes with its eerie atmosphere. Modern elements, like factory equipments or gasoline barrel, were sprinkled throughout, making it feel more like a modern horror scene than the gothic steampunk vibe we have now. Let's not forget the currency situation. Back then, there were only 2 types of in-game currencies, one of which looked a lot like the one in Dead by Daylight. And what were they for? Well, most likely accessories. But unlike the cosmetic-only accessories we have now, these actually came with perks. Too bad that idea got scrapped, because who wouldn't want their character's accessories to actually do something? Speaking of cosmetics, skins worked a little differently too. Instead of full-blown skins, players could mix and match apparel. Imagine a forward rocking a doctor's coat, or a perfumer in a forward's uniform. That would have been a sight. But nope, that got tossed out for the skin system we know today. Wrapping it up, the lobby and matchmaking interface were totally different too. It had its own unique look, but like everything else, it got revamped before release. The third phase, which started in late 2017 and led up to the game's release in April 2018, can be broken down into smaller parts, but let's just hit the highlights. During this phase, 2 key things happened. Survivors got those classic doll-like eyes, and the game's setting shifted from the modern era to the Victorian era. This was when Identity V began to look like the game we recognize today. With the Victorian makeover, some survivors didn't make the cut and were tossed aside, like the paparazzi, Michael George, and Graveyard Girl. However, surprisingly, or maybe not, Lucky Guy managed to survive, still rocking his modern t-shirt and jeans despite the game's new old-timey vibes. Why was Lucky Guy kept? The reason is still unclear, but I have a few theories. First, Lucky Guy was one of the earliest survivors, even during the concept phase. Second, he was probably the most experimented on survivor. And third, he might have become some kind of icon for the developers, a memento of their early work. So, even though he doesn't have deep connections to the game's story, Lucky Guy stayed like a relic of the game's past. Other changes happened too. New survivors were added, like Doctor, Gardener, Lawyer, and Thief. For the hunters, we saw the introduction of Smiley Face, Ripper, Gamekeeper, and Soul Weaver alongside Hell Ember. Another cool thing that came along in the late beta was the deduction path. Players could follow these paths to unlock each character's backstory and get their worn-out outfits, kind of like a spookier, updated version of the Bloody Clothes. Now, let's talk maps. First up is Arms Factory, which got a major makeover. It's smaller now, and modern structures like the pickup truck and cornfield were replaced to fit the Victorian theme. And yes, the tank is still there, which leaves players like me wondering if the map is stuck in some kind of time loop. The map was also rainy back then, unlike now. Next, there's Sacred Heart Hospital. Back in the late beta, this place was actually pretty creepy. On the first floor, you'd find a dead body lying on a bed, and on the second floor, another body would start moving if you got too close. The atmosphere was dark and eerie, but most of these horror elements, like bloodstains on the floor, were removed before the final release. Lastly, there's the Red Church map. It used to be much gloomier, with more trees and wooden structures near the exit gate, making the place feel eerie. The late beta also introduced currencies like clues, fragments, echoes, and inspirations, and the deduction quests back then were way more detailed and gruesome compared to what we have now. All in all, the late beta version of Identity V was pretty close to what we see today, but with more horror and gore. Over time, it was reworked until the game's release, giving us the Tim Burton-style horror we know now. And, well, as you can see, IDV has kept evolving, growing its player base and adding new content. We now have over 40 survivors and more than 30 hunters. The horror vibes have shifted too, going from blood and gore to seeing Joseph looking cute in a Hello Kitty outfit. There's a lot more I could cover about the late beta, but I'll save that for another video. If you have more to add, feel free to drop it in the comments. This is your broadcaster, Silmina, signing out. See you next time, folks!